Welcome back to the Spectre Creative Channel with me, Scott, ToyGuru Neitlich, your host and toy lover extraordinaire. I was fortunate enough to be the brand manager on Masters of the Universe at Mattel for almost 10 years, and one of my big goals for the line that I worked on, which was called Masters of the Universe Classic, was to continue the story that was put out by the 2000X Mike Young Productions show, which was amazing, which is one of my favorite animated series of all time. So a big way we did this is by continuing the story in the form of things like mini-comics. I did a video on this. You can see it in the link here. And aside from the mini-comics, which we actually didn't get to until deep into the line, we also had bios on the back of every character's card. And we used these bios, basically a paragraph at a time, to try to continue the story that 2000X left off. A big reason we were able to do this is because Ian Richter did an amazing interview with He-Man.org, the fan site, where he laid out what the plans were for the future of the show. So if we had gotten to a 9th issue of the mini-comics, we did 8 of them, the plan for issue 9 was going to literally be the one that bridged the gap between the end of 2000X and the start of MOTU Classics. So I want to kind of talk about that here. So where we left off as background with the 2000X series, before it unfortunately left us too soon, was the Snake Men were back. They were a huge part of the second season of 2000X, what was even called Masters of the Universe versus the Snake Men. They renamed the show after the new villains and gave the packaging at retail an annual refresh, turning it from red to green. In the show, Evil-Lyn, who is just constantly betraying Skeletor, decided to team up with King Hiss, tell him about the secrets of Grayskull, and essentially allow King Hiss to trap Skeletor and take over Snake Mountain, which was revealed to be the original fortress of the Snake Men. So Skeletor is imprisoned in Snake Mountain, deep in the bowels. Evil-Lyn is with King Hiss as his kind of, well, not second in command, but she's there. And King Hiss is sitting on the throne of Snake Mountain with his eye on taking over Castle Grayskull and all of Eternia with the help of Evil-Lyn and, of course, all of his Snake Men brethren and warriors who are also with him. So meanwhile, we have the Sorceress, who is defending Castle Grayskull as always, and during the course, or rather towards the finale of Season 2 of 2000X, I'm calling it 2000X, it's the Mike Young series, they're their production line, but most of the fans call it 2000X, so I'm going to use that term. So during the finale, she is attacked by King Hiss, who manages to get into Castle Grayskull with the combined power of Evil-Lyn and Marzo and all of his snake warriors. And during this climactic battle with King Hiss, the Sorceress is bitten by Hiss with his venom. And this, as Ian notes in his interview, is basically the beginning of the end for the Sorceress. She is never going to recover from this poison, and this is sort of her long journey to being replaced by her daughter Teela, who is always destined to become the new Sorceress. So while it's sad that the Sorceress was going to pass, it was kind of inevitable. And Ian makes that clear in the interview, that it was all about forwarding Teela to this position. Teela never has it easy because her father also was temporarily turned into a snake man by King Hiss with the Serpent's Ring. So she's basically got a lot going on in her life, trying to rise up to her new role, dealing with her father turning evil temporarily. And the Snake Men basically start their attempted rule over Eternia, even turning Snake Mountain back into its original form, which was Serpos, the serpent god, and it grows 2 extra heads and attacks everyone. In the end, with the help of Zodak, the Snake Men are banished to Subternia, which is actually where one of their ancient temples is. The Temple of Serpos is what it's called, which is deep in the bowels of an Eternian, crevice or ravine. And the Snake Men wind up sort of being banished into Subternia, and that's where we kind of leave them off at the end of the 2000X series, where they're now back in this temple, but closed off from being able to get to the surface. We also, of course, have Hordak lurking in the background. He's introduced in episode 35, The Powers of Grayskull, we know that he existed in the past and he's still around because he's, I guess like Yoda, lives a very long time, shall we say. And then we also know about King Grayskull, who lived in the past and was one of the original, owners of the Power Sword and helped defeat Hordak and send him to Despondos. And that's where we get canceled. Yay. I mean, not yay, but like, boo. Another show canceled before its time. Why are all the good shows always canceled too early? It just, it makes you sad. But fortunately, there was Second Life with the 2000X storyline, and again, namely, that was classic. So we were going to pick up the ball. And fortunately, the guys at He-Man.org were able to team up with the producers of the show and make one final comic book based on the next available script. So the final script, which was never animated, was written, and that became a pack-in comic book with the DVD set. And the big thing that this revealed was that Man-at-Arms was now going to permanently become a Snake Man. The effect that had changed him temporarily was now going to take permanent effect, and this was actually done for story and merchandise reasons. So while a lot of fans were upset even when we put this figure out in Classics as Snake Man-at-Arms, one, it was established in this comic book by the writers of the show, and it was done by direction of Mattel because he was going to help the Snake Men build snake vehicles. So this way the Snake Men could also have vehicles in the toy line. You already had Skeletor having vehicles, and you had the Masters having vehicles, and by having Man-at-Arms now become a permanent Snake Man, not only did it deplete the Masters of their Weapons Master, but it gave the Snake Men a Weapons Master. So this was going to be the reason that the Snake Men now could have vehicles that kiddies could buy in the toy aisle. And again, all of this is in that interview that Ian did, and I'll have a link in the description, of course, to this. All right, so what Ian goes on to say is the next plan was basically Skeletor was going to come back. He was going to be reborn, more powerful than ever. The time he'd spent in the dungeons of Snake Mountain, he learned some secrets, some more magic, and he comes back more powerful than ever. So his plan is to use the training robot, which we met very early in the 2000X series. And this robot had the ability to create a hologram around itself to look like anyone. And one of the hints that the showrunners put is right when the robot is dying, it flashes blue for just an instant. And this was the hint that this training robot was Faker, because in the show, the robot takes on the hologram disguise of He-Man to battle He-Man, so he can have kind of a one-on-one adversary. And by blinking out blue for half a second, that was your hint that it's really Faker. So Skeletor brings back the robot, reprograms it, and essentially sets this robot out against the Masters, but more specifically against Eternos Palace and King Randor, the ruler of Eternia. So what the people see is they see this blue He-Man coming to take down Randor. And the thing is, blue skin people on Eternia are called Gars. And I won't go into the whole thing about Gars. You could see the video about Skeletor's origin for a little bit more. But essentially, they were a race that crash-landed on Eternia. They had blue skin, and there was a lot of prejudice against them over the years. A lot of it for things that were forgotten in history or misrepresented. But the point is, the people naturally had a prejudice against the blue-skinned race. So seeing that He-Man is really a Gar, and some examples are Keldor, who is Skeletor, is a Gar, and so is Cyclone. So basically anyone with blue skin is seen as a Gar and has that prejudice to go with them. So when the populace learns that He-Man is really a Gar, this is like, whoa, our hero is one of those blue skin guys? Yeah, I know, racism, right? Fun. So Faker attacks King Randor, and it looks like Faker kills King Randor. But what he actually does is opens a portal and sends King Randor into Despondos, because Skeletor just still loves his brother no matter what, I guess, and doesn't want him killed. So Randor falls into a portal into the terrible, crazy, timeless dimension of Despondos where people don't age. Oh, that's why Hordak's never old. That's right, in Despondos you don't age. So Randor winds up here in this other dimension, and the people rise up because they have basically, what they saw was they saw Faker, what they thought was He-Man, killing King Randor, not realizing he was just transporting him to another dimension. And so with their natural already prejudice against the blue-skinned warriors, they rebel against He-Man. And Skeletor takes this opportunity to essentially reveal that he's really Keldor, and he is the original heir to the throne of Eternia, and even though he's also blue-skinned, I know it's a little crazy, but he basically claims the throne for his own. And this is kind of, Skeletor's story coming full circle, because he is the rightful king. That's, when Skeletor says, like, Eternia will be mine, well, it should be his. He was the rightful heir. He was the firstborn son. So one of the first things he does as ruler of Eternia is he orders all of his minions, his evil warriors, to basically ransack all of the magicians and the magic wielders of Eternia, because he doesn't want anyone else to have magic. He wants to control it all. And of course, while Randor is locked into Spondos, there's a lot of people loyal to Randor, namely all of his royal guards are still around. And his royal guards start up a rebellion against Skeletor and try to stop all of Skeletor's evil warriors that are basically putting the kibosh on all of these different mages and wizards. And one of those royal guards, during a struggle in the wizard's hut, it accidentally basically knocks over a time portal potion, which creates a time portal, and sends him into the far-flung future, where he goes on to serve King He-Man. But that's a character story for another time. But that's basically how it happens. That's how Mighty Spectre winds up in the future. All right, so the Masters now, because they are renegades in their own land and they're hated by the populace because they think He-Man killed King Randor, they have to regroup in the caves of Tundaria underground, and they become known as the Renegade Masters of the Universe. And again, this ties into the whole fact that the toy line had to reinvent itself each year as far as themes and packaging, much like they did with the Snake Men. So essentially, the Masters come up from the caves whenever they can to defend the people against, attacks from Snake Men or Skeletor or, anyone, and then retreat back to the caves. Meanwhile, Evil Lyn, which is basically her role in the show, is unlocking or releasing things. It tends to be like what she does. And she releases Hordak from Despondos because she sees that Skeletor is trying to stop all magicians, which includes her, and she doesn't want to lose her magic power. So she releases Hordak in order to take down Skeletor. Yeah, Evil Lyn has got to stop releasing things. It always backfires against her, but she keeps doing it. So Hordak gets released along with all of the Horde from Despondos, and Evil Lyn is basically says, hey, Hordak, I just released you. Go get him. Go get Skeletor. And Skeletor is sitting on the throne of Eternia, minding his own time, happy that all the magicians are having their magic taken away, and that no one else can have magic to overthrow him. And lo and behold, here comes his magic teacher, his master, released from exile, and they have a big, gigantic, climactic fight. Hordak versus Skeletor, and in the end, guess what? Hordak wins, because Hordak is stronger than Skeletor. He is the master, if you will. Skeletor is the Padawan learner. Okay, no, he's not a Padawan. That's a Jedi thing, but you know what I mean. So Skeletor is basically dragged out of the remains of the battle by his loyal warriors, but he's completely defeated. He's drained of magic. He doesn't have any ability to use spells or to use any powers beyond just strength and picking up weapons, if you will. So he's down for the count, though not out. And the Snake Men, meanwhile, as I said, were in Subternia, and they're still wandering around the Temple of Serpos. And this was an image that really stuck in my mind, was the idea of the Snake Men wandering around these caverns. And one of the things they find underground, which was established, is the 3 towers of Eternia, which were pulled underground back in the time of King Grayskull after the first Ultimate Battleground battle. The towers were sucked into the earth to prevent anyone from using them. Not into the earth, into Eternia. So I had this visual in my mind of King Hiss finding Central Tower underground. And in the jaws of Central Tower is the sort of deceased, mummified, zombified corpse of Megator, who got dragged underground by the tower when it was sucked underground at the end of the first Ultimate Battleground. So King Hiss reanimates Megator as a zombie monster, and that starts the process of what's called the Return of the Kings, not to be confused with Lord of the Rings' Return of the King, where Randor, who has been in Despondos, finds his father Miro, who is also in Despondos, and the two of them manage to get back to Eternia. This triggers the towers to rise back up from the ground, signaling that the time has come for the second Ultimate Battleground. So Randor is reunited with his son, and they realize that if they're going to defeat Hordak and King Hiss now, who have become extremely powerful, they're going to need help. So they actually team up with Skeletor, although he's a little bit depowered. And obviously, a lot of the Masters are like, what are we doing? We're like teaming up with Skeletor now? And it's kind of, well, your enemy's enemy is your friend, I guess one could say. And this is what sets up the first mini-comics from the MOTU Classics line. And we get to see this is basically bridging the gap then between the 2000X series and where we pick up with MOTU Classics with the second Ultimate Battleground with all the players in place for a giant, huge battle, the biggest battle we've ever seen. And boy, was Dark Horse not happy when I asked them to draw this, when they realized how many characters I asked to be on one panel. So we see the biggest battle of all time, and you can read more about it if you read the mini-comic, but you'll see Skeletor is able to suck his powers back by depleting Hordak, and all sorts of cool things happen in this battle. It sort of resets the clock and sets us up for new adventures. Well, actually, literally, new adventures. It brings us into that. So that is how the gap was bridged between the unfortunate cancellation of 2000X and the first mini-comics for Masters of the Universe Classics. And that would have been issue 9. We would have done a flashback issue sort of filling in this gap and telling that story. All right, I hope you enjoyed. If you liked it and want to see more content like this, do subscribe and give me a like. It helps tell YouTube to share this with more people, and that's what it's all about, sharing fun toy stories. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.